Welcome to Ad Seriatim. Student loan debt is a problem and a hot topic in the news. The cost of tuition is outpacing inflation year after year, and it's becoming more important than ever to choose your university wisely. Today, we are going to use the College Scorecard API to find the states with the most affordable universities in the U.S. so prospective students can make better informed decisions on where they want to go to college. Let's get into it. The first thing we're going to do is import our libraries. Now we're going to need a couple different ones. MapPandas for storing this data in a data frame, Matplotlib for creating some visualizations, Seaborn for styling those visualizations, NumPy. We're going to need requests to actually make the request to the College Scorecard API. We're going to need config because this is where we're going to store our API key. You need an API key to access the College Scorecard API. And so if you don't have one, just go to that link down below in the description. You can sign up for one really easily and they'll email you one really quickly. We're going to import time. This is to delay our requests between the API because there's a lot of data, there's a lot of schools. So we're going to need to delay each request so we don't overload the server. And then we're going to import random. This is just so we vary our delay occasionally. Let's run this. The next thing we're going to do is start building our request. And so for this data dictionary, what this essentially is a Python dictionary. It's going to hold, is what we're going to use to initially store some of these values. The school is the name of the school, so Alabama, USC, Texas A&M, that's going to be stored in the school list. City, that's going to be the city that this school resides. The state that it's in. The region, now the region ranges from 0 to 9. 0 is U.S. service schools. I'm not sure exactly what U.S. service schools are, but they're not very relevant if you take a look at them, so we're going to filter those out. Number 9 is outlying regions, such as American Samoa and Puerto Rico. We're also going to filter those out because I don't know many students who are going to be considering these schools for where they're going to go. Next, we have in-state tuition. This is the in-state tuition for the university. We have the out-of-state tuition, the control. Now, the control is going to tell us if it is 1, a public school, 2, a private non-profit school, or 3, a private for-profit school like DeVry or some of those other universities. Now, highest degree is going to tell us what is the highest level of degree that this institution confers. Now, we're going to filter out anything that does not offer at least an associate's degree. And then predominant degree, this is the degree that this university offers the most. Now, a university might say they offer an associate's or bachelor's degree, but what do they predominantly award when you take the fraction of graduates from that university? And so we're going to store all this in our data frame, or in this dictionary. We're going to use these two variables so that we can paginate through the API request. The API only returns 100 fields per request. So we're going to start at 0 and then paginate through the results. The make call is going to be for our while loop. Now we're going to start actually building our API request. And so we're going to go into a while loop. And the first thing that we're going to have is our actual URL. We have the base URL, which is here, and then we have the format which we want to receive the data. I want to receive it in a JSON format. You can also choose a TXT format. We have our fields, so our fields correspond to what information we want to pull from this API. So we have the school name, city, state, the latest school degree predominant, the latest highest degree for each university, the latest cost of tuition, in-state, latest cost of tuition out of state, the latest school region ID, so it's going to give us the region, and the latest school ownership. This is going to tell if it's public, private, or private for profit. And then we actually have our API request. We're going to generate an F string. We have the URL here. We have our fields. We have our API key, which is stored in my config file. And then we have our page number, which is going to start at 0 and then iterate up. And so that's going to be our base API request. Next, we're going to actually build that request. That request, we're going to store it in a re-variable. And we're going to do a get request and pass in this API request. And then we're going to get the data in a JSON format. And now we're going to actually parse this JSON result. And so we're going to go by step by step. So essentially what this is saying is that if the results section, what the API request is going to return is a JSON. Now the JSON is initially going to have two fields. One, metadata that's going to have metadata about the API request, and two, results. Now results is going to have the information on all the schools that we want. Now when we finish our results, when the API request that we send brings back no results because we iterated through all the pages, the result is going to be empty. And so that's going to tell us we're at the end, so we do not need to make another API request. And if that is the case, then if it's not empty, we're going to actually iterate through the results. And so we're going to go for data in results. We're going to access that results field. And we're going to have this if statement here. Now this if statement here is going to be used to filter out those schools that I told you are not relevant for this analysis. The first one being the latest school at region ID. If it is 0 or 9 corresponding to state service schools or outlying regions, we're going to filter them out. And if the degree awarded highest is 0 or 1, meaning it's below 2, we are also going to filter those out. So we're just going to continue. Now we're actually going to start iterating through these results. And so we're going to save these to our dictionary that we just went over. And so again, we have our school, and we're appending to that list in the school. We have the city, the state, the predominant degree awarded, the highest degree awarded, the ownership, which again is public, private, or not private for profit. We have the region ID, the in-state, and the out-of-state tuition. We're going to then increment our page number. Once we finish this, now once we have finished iterating through those results, we're going to increment our page number by 1 to get the next page. Then what we're going to do is then we're going to check to see if make call is equal to false. So if the data results is not an empty list, we're going to iterate through the results and get all of our information. If it is equal to an empty list, we're going to do make call and change that equal to false, just like that. And then we're going to make sure we have a time.sleep, meaning we have time between each one of our API calls to ensure we don't overload the server. So time.sleep. And then we're going to use that random package, random.randint, so a random integer between 0 and 3. Now let's go ahead and run it so we can get our data. Quick mistake, we have little carets here that aren't part of the API request. Let's delete those and run it again, and it should work, and here we go. All right, so it just finished. If you ran it yourself, you know there's a typo. This else wasn't at the same level as this if statement, so we never actually made the call false. Same with this page number. We actually never incremented it. And so if you are following along, please update that, or it will run for a long time. If it is right, it will usually run for about 1 minute to 3 minutes, so it does take a little while. So if it does take a couple minutes, don't fret, that's normal. And so the next thing we're going to do is actually convert this dictionary to a data frame. And so we're going to do tuition, we're going to name that data frame tuition DF. And then we're going to drop NAs. There's a lot of NAs in this data set. If you've seen previous videos where we go over imputation methods, usually I would try and do something like that, but because we only have 2 numeric variables and both of them are NA for the entirety of the data set, there's nothing to impute on, so we're just going to drop any NA values. Sweet, now we have our data set. Now we're going to start going into some of these aggregations and visualization. The first thing we're going to go over is overall affordability, and what I mean by this is we're going to look at, out of each state, what is the median cost of tuition and use that as a metric of affordability. So the first thing we're going to do is import Plotly SPX. And then we're going to do our first aggregation. So the first aggregation we're going to do is state DF equals tuition DF grouped by state, and then we're going to take the median of all those values. So what we're really only interested in is the cost of in-state tuition. Well, let's just take the median of all of them, and let's save it. And now we're going to actually make our figure, our Plotly figure. Let me fix formatting. And so what we have here is a Plotly choropleth map. And what it's going to do is show a map of the U.S. and we're going to have essentially a heat map showing higher costs of tuition are going to be red, lower costs of tuition are going to be green. So we have our data frame, we have our color, our in-state tuition, our location mode. We're only looking at the USA, the states. Our locations are going to be our state DF index. Our scope is USA, and then we're going to color on a continuous scale, 0 being green all the way to red. So let's run this. And here we have our actual map. And so we see most of the states are green, having a pretty reasonable cost of tuition. And we see 2 red or 3 red areas that are really, really standing out. The first one being Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and then finally Vermont. These have private liberal arts universities that are very, very expensive to attend. And so it does make sense that these are going to be the higher cost of tuition states. And if we want to get an actual better idea of what these universities are, we can actually sort the values in our state DF to take a look. Let's look at the first 10. And we see the states with the lowest in-state tuition is going to start with New Mexico. So New Mexico overall, when we take into account associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, and universities that confer graduate degrees, New Mexico has the lowest in-state tuition out of all the 50 states. And then it's followed by Wyoming, Montana, Washington, and Hawaii. So these are very, very affordable states to go to college. Now, the next thing we're going to do is look at affordability by just bachelor's degrees. So we want to compare apples to apples. We only want to look at universities that predominantly confer bachelor's degrees to their undergraduates, not associate's degrees or graduate level degrees. And so we're going to do another aggregation. First, we're going to filter predominant degrees equal to 3. Now, in the actual data set, 3 is equal to a university that predominantly awards undergraduate degrees, like I mentioned. And then we're going to do another aggregation where we're going to group it by state and take the median again. Next, we're going to make another Plotly map and then plot this information. So we run it, and we see a different story. We still see Vermont and Massachusetts and Rhode Island still having a high cost of in-state tuition, but we see that there's more when we filter out those junior colleges. We see the cost going way up, especially on these western coast states. We see these states in the kind of the Rocky Mountain area still looking pretty affordable, and we see the cost going up in this northeast or this northern area as well. And so let's get another idea. Let's get another idea about what the actual universities are in this data set. I'm going to sort the values and then by in-state tuition, and then we're going to take the head. And so we see now we have Wyoming. When we're just looking at bachelor's degree, Wyoming has the lowest cost of in-state tuition, followed them again by New Mexico, Montana, Idaho, all the way down. Next, we're going to look at affordability by region. Now, to look at affordability by region, I told you we had these numbers that are representative of some region. And those numbers don't mean much to us. Let's change those to the actual region which they represent. The first one, number 1, corresponds to New England and these corresponding states. Number 2 is the Mideast, these corresponding states. Then the Great Lakes, the Plains, Southeast, Southwest, the Rocky Mountains, and then the far west or the West Coast. And then we're going to rename all those numbers to the actual region that they correspond to. Now again, we have those junior colleges still in our data set. We're going to filter those out, and then we're going to start making our actual visualization. So what we have here is our actual figure and our axes for our matplotlib figure. We have our box plot. We pass in our data set. On the y-axis, we're going to have in-state tuition. On the x-axis, we're going to have region, and then we're going to change our palette so it looks a little better. We're going to set the y label to in-state tuition. We're going to rotate the x-axis because those titles are kind of long and they're going to look a little funky, so we're going to rotate them so they don't overlap. We're going to set a title for our figure. And then we're going to set a grid just because it looks a little bit better. And so let's run this. And we have a box plot here. And we see, again, on the y-axis, we have in-state tuition. On the x-axis, we have our regions. And so if we look, we see that this region right here has the lowest median cost of in-state tuition, which corresponds to the Rocky Mountains: Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Utah, and Wyoming. And the highest region, not surprisingly, is the New England region, corresponding to Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And again, if we want to get a better idea and look at the actual data frame, we can take a look. And again, we have the Rocky Mountains in the beginning, and then followed by the far west and then the southwest. So really along the Rocky Mountains to the west are very affordable. And as you go to that northeast corner of the states, it gets less and less affordable. And let's look at the actual universities in the actual Rocky Mountains. And so we have our region, and we're going to subset it just to Rocky Mountains, and then sort the values by in-state tuition. And so these schools, BYU, Idaho, has an in-state tuition of $4,000 per year. The University of Montana Western, Utah Tech University, Montana State, BYU Provo, all have very affordable tuitions for in-state applicants. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know down in the comments below what region did you think was going to be the most expensive or the most affordable. Or did this meet your expectation, or was this what you were expecting? Let us know, and we'll see you in the next video.